The auctioneer's voice droned through lot numbers like a man reading obituaries. Aria Mendel sat 3 rows back in the county assessor's warehouse, notepad balanced on her knee, watching parcels of failure change hands. Tax-delinquent properties. Land people had walked away from or couldn't afford to keep. Most went for pennies. Her brother Mateo sprawled beside her, arms crossed, carpenter's hands scarred from years of joinery. This is depressing. It's content. It's a Tuesday morning watching broke people lose their land. It's fire mitigation research. Aria tapped her pen against the notepad. Beetle-kill. Salvage policy. Reforestation economics. It's depressing. The auctioneer cleared his throat. Lot 47, Section 12, Township 9 North. 160 acres, zoned forestry. Improvements none. Assessed value, blighted. Opening bid, $64. Silence filled the warehouse like water. Aria leaned forward. 160 acres for $64 meant something was badly wrong with the land. No takers. The auctioneer waited. $64 for 160 acres of timber country. A woman in the front row muttered something to her neighbor. Both shook their heads. Mateo glanced at Aria. Why isn't anyone 64? The auctioneer's patience thinned. 32? Someone give me $32. Aria raised her hand. The auctioneer squinted. 32 to the young lady. Do I hear sold? The woman in the front row didn't turn around. Just said it flat, sold, like she was warning Aria off a cliff. The gavel came down. Mateo stared at his sister. Did you just buy a forest? For $32. Aria, that's 20 cents an acre. There's a reason no one else bid. She stood, gathering her notes. That's what makes it interesting. Outside, the woman from the front row waited by a faded truck. Older, maybe 70, face carved by wind and sun. She watched Aria approach with the expression of someone attending a funeral. You bought the Rook lands. Aria stopped. The what? Section 12. Everyone calls it the Rook lands. The woman's jaw tightened. Blighted ground. Been dead 20 years. Beetle-kill. That's what they say. What do you say? The woman studied her for a long moment. I say some land dies natural, and some land gets killed. She climbed into her truck. I say you got yourself a graveyard, girl. What you do with it is your business. The truck pulled away, trailing dust. Mateo came up beside Aria. That was ominous. That was local color. That was a warning. Aria pulled out her phone, opening the satellite view of Section 12. Gray forest, uniformly gray. Beetle-kill showed patterns, irregular waves of die-off following infestation paths. This looked different, too even, too complete. We're going out there. Today. Right now, Mateo sighed. Your channel has 47 subscribers. 49. This is a lot of trouble for 49 people. 50,000 acres burn every summer. Because salvage policy is backwards. Aria headed for her truck. If I can show one working model of rewilding after beetle-kill, one case study of fire-adapted recovery, you can change forestry policy. I can try. He followed, shaking his head. Your optimism is exhausting. They drove east into hills stippled with pine and madrone. The living forest gave way gradually to gray, not the silver gray of weathered wood. The dull gray of death. No understory, no birds. Just skeletal trees standing in rows like condemned men. Aria pulled over where an old access road met the highway. A rusted chain barred the entrance, lock long since broken. Mateo got out slowly, studying the tree line. This doesn't look like beetle-kill. No, this looks deliberate. Aria pulled her camera from the back seat. Help me with the gear. They hiked in, boots crunching on needles that hadn't decomposed. The air felt wrong. Too still. No insects. No rustle of small animals. Just silence pressing down like a held breath. Mateo stopped at a standing snag, running his hand along the bark. Look at this. Aria moved closer. The bark showed damage, but not from beetles. Chemical scarring. Salt burns. Someone poisoned these trees. Why? I don't know. She filmed the scarring, the uniform death, the unnatural quiet. But I'm going to find out. They pushed deeper. The old access road led to a clearing where concrete slabs marked the ghost of a sawmill. Loading docks, equipment pads, a office foundation choked with blackberry canes. Mateo walked the perimeter, carpenter's eye reading the bones of the operation. Big mill. Industrial scale. He stopped at one slab, larger than the others. What's this? Aria came over. The slab sat lower than the rest. Concrete yellowed and cracked. Mateo knocked on it with his knuckles. The sound came back hollow. He knocked again. Same hollow thud. That's not right. He crouched, running his fingers along a seam, barely visible through decades of moss and dirt. This isn't solid. There's space underneath. A basement. Or storage. He stood, brushing his hands clean. Cold storage, maybe. Mills used to keep equipment and records. Movement at the tree line froze them both. A white stag stood watching, massive, antlers like bone lace against grey wood. Its coat wasn't cream or tan. It was white. Pure white. Luminous in the failing light, Aria's breath caught. The stag held their gaze for 3 heartbeats, then turned and vanished into the dead forest without sound. Mateo's voice came quiet. Did you see? Yeah. White deer are rare, I know, like genetically rare. I know, Mateo. He looked at his sister. This place feels wrong. I know that too. They stood in the clearing as dusk settled over the grey trees. The hollow slab waited. And somewhere in the dead forest, the white stag moved through shadows, like a ghost keeping watch. Aria didn't sleep. She lay in the motel room, scrolling through forestry databases on her laptop, searching for records of Section 12, permits, harvest reports, ownership history. The Rook Timber Syndicate appeared in documents from the 80s and 90s. Then nothing. Like the company had evaporated, Mateo snored in the other bed, unbothered by mysteries. At dawn, they drove back with tools, pry bars, a battery saw, work gloves. Mateo's professional kit for when demolition required finesse. The hollow slab looked more suspicious in daylight. Aria filmed, while Mateo cleared moss and dirt from the seams, revealing a rectangular outline. Not a basement, a hatch. Someone sealed this. He pointed to fresh concrete patching the edges. Not recently. Maybe 20 years. But they wanted it closed. Can you open it? He grinned. I'm a carpenter. I can open anything. The saw screamed through old concrete. Dust rose. Mateo worked methodically, cutting along the seam, leveraging the pry bar into gaps. The slab resisted, then cracked, then shifted with a grinding sound that felt like bone breaking. Cold air rushed up, not the cold of empty space. The cold of refrigeration. Aria knelt at the edge, shining her flashlight down. Metal stairs descended into darkness. The walls were insulated. Industrial cooling units lined the ceiling, dormant but intact. It's a bunker. Mateo peered over her shoulder. For what? Only one way to find out. The stairs rang under their boots. The bunker stretched larger than expected, room after room, carved from earth and reinforced with concrete. The first chamber held racks, wooden billets stacked with precise care, each wrapped in cloth and labeled with codes. Mateo unwrapped one. His breath stopped. Aria. She turned from filming the space. He held the billet like it was made of gold. This is Adirondack spruce, okay? Old growth, century seasoned. His fingers traced the grain with reverence. This is tonewood, guitar grade, maybe violin grade. He checked another billet. Brazilian rosewood. This is CITES band. You can't import this anymore. How much is it worth? I don't know. Thousands per billet? Maybe more? He looked around the racks. There's hundreds of these. Aria's camera captured everything. The racks, the labels, the cold storage system that had kept wood preserved for decades. The second chamber held equipment. Distillation apparatus, beakers, containers of resin labeled with chemical formulas. A workshop for extracting and refining something from trees. The third chamber stopped them both. Ledgers, metal filing cabinets lined the walls, drawers labeled by year. Aria pulled one open. Handwritten logs, shipment records, names and dates and dollar amounts that made her pulse quicken. Mateo, he came over. She read aloud. Section 9, brine injection protocol. 20 trees per acre, coordinates attached. Her voice flattened. They were poisoning the forest on purpose. Why? She flipped pages. More sections, more coordinates. A systematic pattern of killing trees across multiple townships. And beside each entry, property acquisition notes. Land purchased at delinquent tax sales. Homestead seized. They crashed the property values. Aria's hands shook. Kill the trees, tank the land prices, buy everything cheap. That's fraud, theft, ecological terrorism. She kept reading. Names she recognized from the auction. Families who'd lost land. People who'd disappeared or moved away or stopped fighting. Mateo opened another drawer. More ledgers. These showed the smuggling operation. Stonewood imported illegally, stored here, distributed to high-end luthiers and furniture makers. Millions of dollars moving through a shell company called Rook Timber Syndicate. This isn't just evidence of environmental crime. He held up a ledger. This is organized criminal enterprise. Aria's camera caught everything. The logs, the chemical recipes, the maps showing injection sites. Every page another layer of proof that Section 12 hadn't died. It had been murdered. And then she found the final ledger, the one listing stockholders and beneficiaries of the Rook Timber Syndicate. Names with ownership percentages. Board members. Silent partners. At the top, Vivian Rook, current CEO, sole heir. They're still operating. Mateo looked up. What? The company? It's not defunct. It's just dormant. Aria checked the incorporation records in the back of the ledger. The Rook Timber Syndicate still exists, and someone named Vivian Rook owns all of it, including this bunker, including everything we just found. They stood in the cold storage, surrounded by contraband wood and evidence of systematic destruction. The camera's red light blinked steadily, recording, documenting, making what they'd discovered impossible to hide. Mateo's voice came quiet. We need to be careful. We need to be thorough. Aria, if this is worth what I think it's worth, 50 million, maybe 60. That's conservative. She kept filming. But that's not what matters. The evidence matters. The truth matters. She turned the camera on the racks of forbidden wood. This bunker is proof of decades of theft, ecological crime, community destruction. Her voice hardened. We're not selling this quietly. We're making it impossible to ignore. Footsteps scraped above them. Both froze. Someone had followed them down. The footsteps stopped at the bottom of the stairs. An older woman emerged from shadows, gray hair pulled back severe, eyes sharp enough to cut. Aunt Jo. Aria lowered the camera. Her mother's sister, the family collector, the roadside stand proprietor who bought estate trunks and sold junk that tells truth. Joe Mendel looked around the bunker with the expression of someone confirming a long-held suspicion. So you found it. You knew about this? I knew something was here. Rumors, whispers. Joe moved to the racks of tonewood, touching the wrapped billets. Your grandfather worked at the mill before it closed. Said there were rooms the owners kept locked. Said trees were dying in patterns that didn't make sense. Mateo stepped forward. Why didn't he say something? He did. Joe's face hardened. No one listened. Or the people who might have listened got paid to forget. She pulled a folded paper from her jacket. I brought you something. The paper was a map. Hand-drawn, detailed, dated 1947. It showed Section 12 and surrounding townships, but the boundaries didn't match current property lines. Notes in the margins listed mill operations and shipping routes. Aria spread it on a workbench. Where did you get this? Estate sale. 3 years ago. Old trunk from a mill supervisor's widow. Joe pointed to markings on the map. These codes match what's in those ledgers, don't they? Aria checked. Perfect match. The mill punch cards, too. Joe produced a bundle of yellowed cardstock. Work records. These show who was here when, what they were processing. Some of these names, she stopped. Some of these names are families that vanished, or moved away sudden, or stopped asking questions about their land. Mateo studied the punch cards. This is chain of custody proof. These connect the cash to specific operations. These connect crimes to names. Aria's mind raced. Joe, can I film this? Can I document everything you brought? That's why I'm here. Joe's expression softened slightly. Your grandfather wanted someone to know. He collected pieces his whole life. Maps, records, stories people were afraid to tell out loud. When he died, I kept collecting. She gestured to the bunker. This place was a ghost story. Now it's evidence. They spent 2 hours cataloging connections. Punch cards aligned with ledger shipments. Map coordinates matched brine injection sites. Names appeared across documents, witnesses, workers, families displaced. Aria uploaded preliminary footage to her channel with a careful title, "The Forest That Died on Paper." In the video, she didn't name names yet, just showed the dead trees, the chemical scarring, the unnatural uniformity of collapse. Within an hour, 49 subscribers became 300. By evening, someone local had seen it. The comment appeared simple: "You're on the Rooklands. Be careful." Then another: "My grandfather lost his homestead there. They said it was taxes. But the trees died first and the well went bad." Then a dozen more. Stories pouring out. Memories of forests killed overnight. Property seized. Questions that got shut down hard. Aria sat in the motel room, reading testimonies from people who'd waited decades to be heard. Mateo paced, phone pressed to his ear, talking to a lawyer friend about land fraud and statute of limitations. Joe made coffee in the little pot by the sink. "You're stirring up ghosts." "Someone needs to. People with money don't like ghosts, especially ones that cost them $50 million and a reputation. Then they shouldn't have buried evidence in a bunker." Joe smiled grimly. "Your grandfather would have liked you." She poured 3 cups, steam rising. "He'd also tell you to be smart. Document everything. Build the case airtight. Because the moment you name names, the fight gets real." Aria pulled up the ledger scans on her laptop. The list of beneficiaries, the corporate structure. All roads leading to Vivian Rook. I need experts. Scientists who can confirm the die-off was engineered. Legal minds who can trace ownership and theft. People who can make this matter beyond YouTube. I know someone. Joe sipped coffee. Chief Tamsin Greyhawk, firekeeper for the tribal council. She's been fighting timber companies and water rights battles for 20 years. Lost a cousin to a mill accident back in the 80s. Joe's eyes went distant. An accident everyone knew wasn't an accident. Will she talk to me? If you're serious about restitution and not just exposure, she'll do more than talk. Joe set down her cup. But you need science too. Proof of method. Proof of harm. Mateo ended his call. I know a mycologist, Dr. Soren Iqbal, published on fungal succession in burned forests. Got blacklisted by industry sponsors for criticizing salvage logging. He looked at Aria. If anyone can prove the forest was poisoned, it's him. Aria opened a new document. Started drafting outreach emails. Chief Greyhawk, Dr. Iqbal, federal land fraud investigators. Every angle she could think of to make the evidence undeniable. Joe watched her work. They're going to come after you. I know, not just legally. There's money here, power, history people wanted buried. Joe's voice dropped. You found their graveyard. Now they'll want to bury you in it. Then we move faster than they do. Aria kept typing. We make the story too public to silence. We get people who matter to care. We turn this forest into a line no one can cross without consequences. Outside, night pressed against the motel windows. Somewhere in section 12, the white stag moved through dead trees under starlight, watching, waiting, a pale witness to crimes that refused, to stay buried in a reckoning that was only beginning. Chief Tamsin Greyhawk arrived at dawn with soil testing equipment and a face that had seen too many broken promises. She moved through the dead forest like someone reading a crime scene, stopping at trees to examine bark, pressing fingers into earth that should have been rich with decomposition. Dr. Soren Iqbal came behind her, microscope case slung over one shoulder, already muttering about fungal succession patterns. Young Pakistani, perpetually disheveled in a way that suggested sleep was optional when science called. Aria followed with her camera. Mateo carried sample bags and marked locations on GPS. Tamsin stopped at a stand of pines that had died in a tight cluster. She knelt, scraping soil into a vial. Salt concentration is off the charts. How off? Aria asked. Dead sea levels? Tamsin held the vial to sunlight. White crystals glinted. Nothing grows in this. Nothing decomposes properly. The soil is poisoned at the root level. Soren had his hand on a tree trunk, nose inches from the bark. You look at this scarring pattern. Chemical burn, but selective. They targeted the cambium layer specifically. He pulled out a jeweler's loop. And the resin pockets show contamination. Someone injected these trees with something designed to kill from the inside out. Can you prove it? Mateo's voice was tight. I can prove method, timeline, and consequence. Soren straightened, eyes bright with the kind of enthusiasm reserved for solving impossible puzzles. The fungal community here is completely disrupted. Normal succession after beetle-kill shows specific species in specific orders. This forest has none of that. What's here are salt-tolerant extremophiles and chemical-resistant decomposers, species you'd find in industrial waste sites, not mountain ecosystems. Tamsin moved to another location, this one marked on Aunt Jo's map. A depression in the earth, rectangular, deliberately excavated and filled. She dug with a trowel. 6 inches down, the soil turned dark and oily. Brine pit. Aria's camera caught everything. The excavation. The contaminated soil. Tamsin's expression hardening into something beyond anger. These pits were used historically to dispose of salt waste from processing. Tamsin kept digging. But they were also used deliberately to poison ground. Make it worthless. Force people out. She looked up, and Aria saw generations of displacement in her eyes. My great-grandfather's allotment bordered this section. The creek that fed his land originated here. One summer the water turned brackish, killed everything downstream. By winter he couldn't pay taxes on dead ground. The ledgers list allotment seizures, Aria said quietly. I know. Tamsin stood, brushing soil from her hands. I've been waiting 40 years for proof. They spent the day documenting. Soren collected samples from 30 trees, cataloguing chemical signatures and fungal DNA. Tamsin mapped brine pits and traced contamination patterns through the watershed. Every test confirmed what the ledgers had claimed. This forest hadn't died. It had been executed. By late afternoon, they gathered at the bunker. Aria had printed pages from the ledgers, spreading them across a makeshift table. Soren matched chemical formulas to his samples. Tamsin aligned brine pit locations with property seizures. This is systematic ecocide. Soren's voice had lost its enthusiasm, replaced by clinical precision. Engineered collapse designed to look natural. If I hadn't seen the injection scars and soil chemistry, I'd have ruled it Beetle-kill, too. How many forests? Mateo asked. Tamsin traced her finger across the map. If these coordinates are accurate, 15 sections across 3 townships. Maybe 60,000 acres total. Aria felt the number like a physical weight. 60,000 acres deliberately destroyed. Hundreds of families displaced. An entire ecosystem murdered for profit. We can't let them bury this again. We won't. Tamsin's voice carried the authority of someone who'd spent decades fighting. But we do this right. Not just exposure, restitution, land back. Water rights restored. The people who lost everything because of these crimes need to be made whole. That's going to take more than a YouTube video, Mateo said. It's going to take federal intervention, tribal sovereignty enforcement, and a community willing to fight. Tamsin looked at Aria. You ready for that? I found the bunker. I'm not walking away. Finding it was easy. Tamsin began packing her samples. Keeping it from being disappeared is harder. The people who profit from this will move fast once they know you have evidence. As if summoned by prophecy, Aria's phone buzzed. An email from an address she didn't recognize. Subject line, generous offer regarding Section 12. She opened it. Ms. Mendel, I represent interests concerning the property you recently acquired. We're prepared to offer $2.5 million for immediate transfer of title and all associated materials. Please respond within 48 hours. This offer expires and will not be renewed. V. Rook. Aria showed the phone to the others. Soren whistled. They're scared. They're moving. Tamsin's jaw tightened. Which means you need to move faster. Get everything documented, backed up, and distributed. Once that offer expires, they'll stop asking nicely. Vivian Rook arrived on a Tuesday in a black SUV with tinted windows and the kind of composure that suggested she'd never been told no. Mid-40s, expensive suit, smile calibrated to project warmth while communicating total control. She found Aria at the bunker site, camera in hand, filming Soren's sample collection. Ms. Mendel, I'm Vivian Rook. Extended hand. Firm grip. Eyes that assessed and categorized in seconds. I believe you received my offer. Aria lowered the camera. I did. And I'm not interested. Vivian's smile didn't change, but something behind it sharpened. $2.5 million for land you paid $32 for. That's not interesting. The land's not for sale. Everything's for sale at the right price. $3 million? No, 4. Aria kept her voice level. How much is it worth to keep what's in that bunker hidden? The smile finally cracked. Just for a moment. Then reconstructed itself. I have no idea what you're talking about. The contraband tonewood. The ledgers documenting systematic environmental destruction. The evidence of timber fraud and land theft going back 40 years. Aria held up her camera. I have it all documented, backed up, distributed to multiple sources. Vivian's expression went cold. You have trespassed on a decommissioned industrial site and stolen property belonging to a legitimate corporation. I have a deed to this land. Everything on it belongs to me now. That deed can be contested. Contest it. While federal investigators catalog your family's criminal enterprise, they stood in morning sunlight, 2 women on opposite sides of a line drawn in stolen ground. Vivian's composure returned, smooth and poisonous. You're making a mistake. People who fight me don't win. They lose, badly and publicly. She glanced at Mateo, at Soren still working nearby. You have people you care about. Think about them before you decide to be heroic. Aria felt ice in her chest. Not fear, rage. Is that a threat? It's advice. From someone who understands how the world actually works. Vivian turned to leave, then paused. The offer stands for 48 hours. After that, you're on your own. The SUV pulled away, trailing dust. Mateo came up beside his sister. She just threatened us. She did. On camera. Audio only. I was recording. Soren looked up from his samples. You made an enemy. I documented one. By afternoon, Sheriff Callum Bryce arrived in his county cruiser, folksy smile and sunglasses reflecting the dead trees. He stepped out slow, hand resting casual on his belt near. The gun he probably hoped he'd never have to use. Miss Mendel, heard you've been poking around out. Here, it's my property. About that, he pulled papers from his jacket. Counties received complaints about unsafe conditions, structural instability, environmental hazards. The smile widened. I'm posting this site closed pending inspection. On what authority? Public safety. Section 47 of County Code. He walked past her, began zip-tying closure notices to trees. No one enters until engineers clear it. That includes you. I own this land, and I'm responsible for keeping people safe. He met her eyes, and behind the folksy charm was something mean and petty. You got a problem with that? File an appeal. Takes about 6 months. This is harassment. This is my job. He finished posting notices, paused by his cruiser. Friendly advice? Take the lady's offer, go home. Some fights aren't worth having. Who's paying you? The smile vanished. Careful, Miss Mendel. Accusing an officer of corruption is a serious thing. Proving it is easier. He got in his cruiser, pulled out slower than necessary. Watching, threatening with patience, Aria stood surrounded by closure notices. Phone already dialing Lila Cade's number. The investigative podcaster who specialized in resource crimes and corruption. The woman who'd brought down a refinery with nothing but documentation and persistence. Time to bring daylight to the dead forest. The first attempt came at 2 in the morning. Aria woke to her phone, buzzing with motion alerts from the trail cameras she'd installed around the bunker site. 3 figures moving through trees, faces covered, carrying equipment. She watched on her screen as they approached the slab, setting something down. Containers, accelerant, Mateo. She shook her brother awake. They're at the site. He was up in seconds, pulling on boots. Call the sheriff. He's probably the one who sent them. They drove fast through darkness, Aria on the phone with Lila Cade, narrating everything, creating a real-time audio record. If something happened, at least someone would know. The glow appeared before they reached the access road. Orange against black sky. Fire. Mateo gunned the engine. They skidded into the clearing to find flames already climbing the edges of the slab, eating the wooden frame Mateo had built to shore up the entrance. The three figures scattered into trees, but Aria's camera caught them. Shapes, builds, one limping slightly. Mateo had the fire extinguisher out, spraying foam, while Aria ran to where they'd stored backup documents in a fireproof safe buried 30 yards from the bunker, still intact. The ledgers remained below ground, protected by concrete and depth. The fire died under chemical foam. Damage was minimal. The sabotage had been rushed, sloppy, or maybe just a warning. Aria reviewed the trail camera footage on her laptop. 3 men. One showed enough profile to identify Hank O'Keefe, local sawyer known as Burl. The man Vivian Rook kept on retainer for jobs regular contractors wouldn't touch. I'm sending this to Lila. Aria's hands shook with adrenaline, and to the Federal Land Fraud Division, and backing it up 3 more places. Mateo sat on the ground, soot-stained, exhausted. They're going to keep coming. Then we keep documenting. Aria, they're desperate. That means we're winning. A sound made them both turn. Movement at the tree line. For a moment, Aria thought the saboteurs had returned. Then she saw white in the darkness. The stag. It stood watching, massive and pale, antlers stark against night. Its eyes reflected the dying embers with an intelligence that felt almost accusatory. Then it turned and vanished. It left. Mateo's voice was quiet. I know. Bad sign. I don't know. They spent the rest of the night on watch, camera recording, lights blazing. At dawn, someone else appeared. A teenager on a mountain bike, drone controller in hand, grinning like Christmas had come early. You're Aria Mendel. I am. I'm Sparks. Well, Gemma, but everyone calls me Sparks. She held up the controller. I do aerial cinematography for the high school STEM program. Saw your videos. Figured you could use eyes in the sky. Aria looked at this kid, with purple-streaked hair and borrowed equipment and fearless enthusiasm. You know this could get dangerous. Lady, I fly drones over active prescribed burns for the Forestry Service. Danger is my middle name. Sparks launched the drone with practiced ease. Besides, someone needs to get good footage of the bad guys. Might as well be me. The drone's feed showed the clearing from above. Burn patterns. Tire tracks from the saboteur's vehicle. Evidence Sheriff Bryce would ignore, but federal investigators wouldn't. Mateo watched the kid work. You're not scared. I'm terrified. But I'm also 16 and chronically online. You think I'm going to miss the chance to be part of something that actually matters? Sparks maneuvered the drone lower. Plus my mom lost her house in a fire caused by salvage logging slash. So yeah, I've got opinions about timber crime. Aria felt something shift. Not just her investigation anymore. Other people were stepping forward, taking risks. Refusing to let the forest stay buried. Her phone rang. Leela Cade, I listened to your audio from last night. We're running it as a special episode this afternoon. The podcaster's voice was steady, professional. The Forest That Was Murdered on Paper Part 2, the cover-up. And I've got someone who wants to talk to you. Who? Carmen Duarte, federal land fraud investigator. She's been trying to build a case against Rook Holdings for 5 years. You just handed her everything she needed. Aria looked around the clearing. Burn scars on concrete. Trail camera evidence. A kid with a drone capturing angles that would make denial impossible. Her brother standing guard with a fire extinguisher and carpenter's conviction. The stag was gone. But something else was growing. Not just a story. A reckoning. Tell her I'm ready to talk, Aria said, because the fires in the dark had only made the evidence brighter. Lila Cade's voice filled. Headphones and car speakers across 3 states, measured, empathetic, relentless. This is buried resources, and this is the story of a forest that was murdered on paper. She opened with the trail camera footage. Audio of men moving through darkness, the sound of accelerant splashing. Aria's voice narrating coordinates while driving through night. Then silence where the fire should have been consuming evidence. Instead, documentation surviving. Truth refusing to burn. The Rook Timber Syndicate operated from 1979 to 2003, ostensibly as a lumber concern. But documents recovered from a refrigerated bunker tell a different story. A story of systematic ecocide, engineered die-offs, land theft masquerading as tax delinquency, Lila's cadence built carefully, a story of families who lost everything and were told to blame beetles and bad luck. The episode featured interviews. Lila had spent 3 days in the county, recording people who'd waited decades to speak. An old man whose homestead borders had been seized. The trees died first. Then the well went bad. By spring, I couldn't pay the taxes. They took it for pennies and sold it to Rook the next year. I always knew it was wrong. I just couldn't prove it. A woman whose father had worked at the mill. He came home sick one night. Said they were injecting poison into healthy trees. Said it wasn't right. A week later, he had an accident. Fell from a catwalk. They ruled it accidental. Her voice cracked. But he'd been working mills 30 years without incident. A younger voice, recorded outside the county courthouse. My grandmother's pension disappeared when the mill closed. Just gone. No severance, no explanation. She died broke, and we thought she'd mismanaged money. Now we know it was stolen, story after story, pattern after pattern. Harm that had been atomized, individualized, blamed on bad luck or poor choices. Now reassembled into a single clear picture of organized crime. Aria listened in her motel room, Mateo beside her, both of them hearing their investigation transformed into something larger than evidence, into testimony, into a community's long-silenced voice finding words. Lila's closing statement, the Rook Timber Syndicate no longer exists on paper. But its heir, Vivian Rook, controls assets worth hundreds of millions. Assets built on ecological destruction and land theft. The question facing us now is simple. Do we let the past stay buried because digging it up is uncomfortable? Or do we insist that justice has no statute of limitations when the harm is still being felt? The download numbers climbed. 50,000 in the first hour, then 100,000. Major outlets picked it up. Environmental justice groups, legal reform advocates, people who'd been fighting timber fraud in other regions and suddenly had a case study that proved the pattern existed. Aria's phone wouldn't stop ringing. Reporters, activists, lawyers offering pro bono representation, and threats. Anonymous accounts telling her to drop it, to take the money, to stop before she got hurt worse than hurt. Mateo blocked numbers as fast as they came in. This is getting out of control. This is working. Aria scrolled through messages, sorting legitimate contacts from noise. Look, 3 different environmental law clinics want to file briefs. 2 tribal sovereignty groups are citing our case. The state AG's office is asking for documents, and 12 people have told you to die in a fire. 13. One came in while you were talking. He grabbed her phone. This isn't funny. I know. She met his eyes. But we can't stop now. Not when people are finally being heard. A knock on the door froze them both. Mateo looked through the peephole, then opened it carefully. Carmen Duarte stood in the hallway. 40-something, composed, carrying a badge, and the expression of someone who'd seen every variety of fraud and still found new ways to be disappointed by humanity. Ms. Mendel. I'm Agent Duarte, Federal Land and Resources Fraud Division. She showed credentials. Can we talk? Carmen Duarte worked like a surgeon, precise, methodical. She'd arrived with a team of 3 specialists and enough legal authority to freeze everything. Within 500 feet of the bunker, they catalogued for 2 days straight. Every billet photographed and tagged. Every ledger scanned and entered into federal databases. Chain of custody documentation that would survive any legal challenge. Vivian Rook responded with a press conference. She stood outside her corporate offices in the city, makeup perfect. Message crafted by professionals who understood how to weaponize empathy. I'm saddened by the reckless accusations being made by Ms. Mendel. Vivian's voice carried practiced concern. My family's company operated legally for decades, providing jobs and economic stability to rural communities. Were there environmental impacts? Of course. That was the nature of timber work in that era. But to characterize legitimate business as criminal enterprise, to exploit local tragedy for internet fame, She shook her head. It's irresponsible, it's defamatory, and it's causing real harm to people trying to move forward. The reporters ate it up. Questions about Aria's qualifications, her subscriber count before finding the bunker, whether this was opportunism disguised as activism. Mateo watched the press conference on his phone, fury building. She's making you look like a con artist. She's desperate. Aria didn't look up from the laptop, where she was reviewing Carmen's preliminary findings. People who are winning don't need press conferences. Carmen appeared in the doorway of the bunker, tablet in hand, expression unreadable. The wood is authenticated. Precise, Brazilian rosewood, Adirondack spruce, Cuban mahogany. Conservative auction estimate is 56 million, and the ledgers, admissible. We've corroborated entries with county tax records, property transfers, and water quality reports. The pattern is clear and prosecutable. Carmen sat on the equipment crate looking tired. But proving corporate successor liability will be harder. Vivian Rook wasn't born when most of these crimes occurred. Her lawyers will argue she inherited assets, not culpability. What about restitution? That's where it gets complicated. Carmen pulled up documents on her tablet. The families who lost land are scattered. Some are deceased without heirs. Property has changed hands multiple times. Water rights have been reassigned. Untangling it will take years. What about the wood? The wood is contraband. Legally, it gets seized and auctioned, with proceeds going to the federal government. Carmen paused. Unless we can make a case for community restitution as part of a broader settlement. Aria felt the weight of that unless. Everything she'd found could end up benefiting the same government systems that had enabled the theft in the first place. There has to be another way. There is. Carmen met her eyes. Public pressure, community testimony. Making this about more than money and making it impossible for courts to ignore the human cost. A truck pulled into the clearing, old paint faded, moving slow. It parked and Hank Burl O'Keefe climbed out, looking like a man walking to his own execution. Carmen's hand moved to her sidearm. That's one of the arson suspects. Wait. Aria stepped forward. Let him talk. Burl stood 20 feet away, hands visible, face carved with guilt and exhaustion. I came to confess. You should talk to a lawyer first, Carmen said. I've been lying 30 years. I'm done. He pulled a phone from his pocket. Burner, Vivian's fixer uses it to send orders. Told me to salt trees in '94. Told me to intimidate the Clark family when they wouldn't sell. Told me to torch your bunker last week. He held it out. Text history goes back 2 years. It's all there. Carmen took the phone with gloved hands. Why now? Burl's jaw worked. I saw the billet stamps in your photos. Recognized one. My friend Terry carved those marks before he died. His voice cracked. They said his mill accident was bad luck. But I helped sabotage the equipment because Vivian's father wanted him gone. 30 years I've carried that. I'm not carrying it anymore. The silence stretched. My sister's well went bad from the salt we used. Her daughter was born with kidney problems. I told myself I was just following orders, just making money to survive. He looked at Aria. You're right to dig this up. Someone needs to. Carmen began reading Miranda rights. Burl nodded through them, accepting culpability with something like relief. As they led him away, he called back, The sheriff has a second phone too. Same fixer. You get that phone, you get everything. The town hall hadn't been this full in 20 years. Every seat taken, people standing against walls, overflow watching from the steps outside. The tribal council had called the hearing, but momentum came from everywhere. Federal presence, media attention. A community that had been silent for generations and suddenly had permission to speak. Chief Tamsin Greyhawk opened with traditional protocol. Acknowledgement of land, of water, of relationships that predated titles and treaties. Then she shifted into English, her voice carrying the weight of decades. We're here because crimes were committed, not ancient history, not abstract harm. Crimes that stole land, poisoned water, displaced families, and destroyed an ecosystem. She gestured to the maps spread on tables. These documents prove what many of us knew but couldn't prove. The die-off was engineered. The seizures were orchestrated. The suffering was deliberate. She outlined stolen allotments, water rights severed, traditional gathering sites rendered toxic. Restitution isn't optional. It's mandatory, and it must include co-management of restored lands, tribal sovereignty over watershed recovery, and reparations to families whose futures were stolen. The audience murmured agreement. Carmen Duarte sat in the front row, taking notes, federal authority lending legitimacy to demands that had been dismissed for decades. Aunt Jo approached the mic next. She carried her estate sale treasures like holy relics, maps, punch cards, photographs of families who'd been erased from official records but preserved in attic trunks and yard sales. This is Fletcher Mendoza. Lost his homestead in 1983. This is Sarah Park's grandfather. Disappeared after reporting chemical dumping. This is the Clearwater family. 7 generations on land that was stolen in a single tax sale. She laid each item on the table with ceremony. These are the ghosts Vivian Rook once buried. These are the people who deserve justice. Then Maylin Park stood. 30-something math teacher, 8 months pregnant, carrying a ledger entry she'd found in the cache with her family's name. My grandfather was Park Ji-hoon. The ledgers list him as a whistleblower. Removed. Her voice shook but held. Removed, that's all it says. My family was told he went to Seattle for work and lost touch. We spent generations wondering why he abandoned us. She held up the entry. Now I know he didn't abandon us. He was murdered for trying to tell the truth. The room went utterly silent. Restitution for my family doesn't bring him back, but it acknowledges what happened. It says his life mattered. His truth mattered, and the company that killed him doesn't get to keep profiting from silence. Testimony continued for 3 hours. Families speaking names that had been lost, wells that had been poisoned. Children who'd grown up poor because pensions vanished. Land that should have been passed down, but was stolen before parents could transfer titles. Mateo stood, surprising Aria, her practical brother who avoided bureaucracy and speeches. I'm a carpenter. I work with wood every day. When I saw those billets in the bunker, I recognized craft, beauty, value. He paused. But every piece of that wood is evidence of theft. Trees that should still be growing. Forests that should be alive. I came here to move brush. I'm staying to make sure the people who destroyed this place can't profit from its corpse. The room erupted in applause. Aria watched faces. Saw grief transformed into witness. Isolation transformed into solidarity. Shame transformed into righteous anger. Carmen Duarte stood, and the room quieted. The federal government takes land fraud seriously. We're initiating proceedings to freeze Rook Holdings, pending restitution. We're investigating successor liability and RICO violations. And we're working with tribal authorities to establish co-management frameworks for restored lands. She looked directly at the crowd. This will take time, but the days of burying crimes because they're old are over. Outside, dusk settled over the town. In the distance, where Section 12 bordered living forest, a shape moved through trees, white against shadow. The stag had returned. Aria saw it through the window. Mateo followed her gaze. It came back. The forest is remembering how to live, Aria said quietly. Inside, people were exchanging phone numbers, forming committees, organizing mutual aid. Not just a hearing, a movement. And somewhere in the city, Vivian Rook was making final calculations, trying to decide whether to flee or fight. Unaware that some battles are already lost the moment the truth refuses to stay buried. The morning after Jake's decision dawned clear and cold. The kind of October day that made the Montana sky look like polished steel, stretched tight between mountain peaks. Jake stood on his front porch, coffee cooling in his hands, watching Sheriff Martinez's patrol car turn up the gravel drive. Behind Martinez came 2 unmarked federal vehicles, and bringing up the rear, Vincent Torino's black Escalade. The convergence he had dreaded was finally here. Emma emerged from the house carrying 2 manila folders and a thermos of coffee, her expression determined but calm. Luke followed, still moving carefully but insistent on being present for whatever came next. The sight of his children flanking him, united in purpose, despite everything they had been through, gave Jake strength he hadn't known he still possessed. "Everyone's here," Emma observed, her voice steady. "Federal prosecutors, criminal family representatives, local law enforcement. It's like a summit meeting. More like a reckoning," Luke added, wincing slightly as he adjusted his weight. The bruises from Tommy Castellano's beating had faded to yellow-green, but the memories remained vivid. Vincent Torino emerged from his vehicle first, his expensive coat incongruous against the rural backdrop. Tommy Castellano flanked him, hand resting obviously on the bulge beneath his jacket. But it was the woman who stepped out of the passenger seat who surprised everyone. Maria Torino Chen, Vincent's sister, whom Jake had met only briefly during the family's initial visit weeks ago. Agent Richardson and Prosecutor Williams approached from their cars, briefcases in hand, expressions professionally neutral. Sheriff Martinez took a position roughly equidistant from all parties, his own hand resting on his service weapon. "This is private property," Jake said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "I'll speak with each group, but together. Whatever gets said here, everyone hears it." Vincent's jaw tightened. "Some conversations are meant to be private, Sullivan." "Not this one," Maria Torino Chen interjected, moving to stand apart from her brother. "Not anymore." "What happened in the past affected more than just our families. What happens today should be witnessed," Agent Richardson nodded approvingly. "Transparency serves everyone's interests here." Jake looked at each group assembled in his yard. These representatives of competing claims on his grandfather's money, his family's future, his own conscience. The weight of 3 generations pressed on his shoulders, but somehow it no longer felt crushing. Instead, it felt like purpose crystallizing into action. 3 days ago, I found my grandfather's final letter, Jake began, pulling the weathered envelope from his pocket. Written in 1954, 21 years after he allegedly helped transport Frank Torino's money. He never mailed it, but he addressed it to the Chicago Tribune. Vincent stepped forward. "What did it say?" Emma opened one of her folders and handed a typed transcript to her father. Jake cleared his throat and began to read, "To whom it may concern. My name is Daniel Sullivan, and in 1933 I helped a dying man named Frank Torino hide money that belonged to his criminal organization. I was 19 years old, desperate for work, and I told myself I was just helping a sick man protect his family's future. I've carried this guilt for 21 years. The money has allowed me to build a life, buy land, start a family. But it was built on crime, on violence, on the suffering of countless victims. I've tried to make amends by living an honest life, by helping my neighbors, by raising my son to understand right from wrong. But it is not enough. The money corrupts everything it touches. If anything happens to me before I can make this public, I hope my descendants will find the courage I lacked and return this blood money to where it can do some good. The victims deserve justice, even if it comes too late." Silence settled over the group like snow. Vincent's face had gone pale, while Maria wiped tears from her eyes. Agent Richardson exchanged glances with the prosecutor. "Your grandfather tried to do the right thing," Maria said softly. "Uncle Frank, he changed too at the end. He tried to go legitimate, tried to help people instead of hurting them. Maybe that's why he trusted your grandfather with the money." Vincent's expression hardened. "Sentiment doesn't change ownership. That money belongs to our family, does it?" Emma stepped forward, opening her second folder. "I've spent the last month researching the documented crimes committed by Frank Torino's organization between 1925 and 1933. Extortion, illegal gambling, bootlegging operations that sold poisonous alcohol, protection rackets that bankrupted legitimate businesses. I've found descendants of over 40 families who were direct victims of these crimes." She handed copies of her research to each group. "The money our family has benefited from came directly from these crimes. Every dollar was taken from legitimate business owners, from families trying to make an honest living during the Depression. Some of those families never recovered. Their children grew up in poverty because of what Frank Torino's organization did to their parents. Luke spoke up, his voice gaining strength. We can't give the money back to the original victims. Most are dead. But we can give it to their descendants. We can use it to fund programs that help people rebuild from criminal victimization. We can break the cycle. Agent Richardson leaned forward. What exactly are you proposing, Mr. Sullivan? Jake folded his grandfather's letter carefully, returning it to his pocket. I'm proposing we establish a victim restitution fund. The federal government will oversee its administration to ensure transparency. Maria here has agreed to help identify legitimate victim families from the historical record. The money will go to education funds, small business loans, and support services for families affected by organized crime, both historical and contemporary. How much money are we talking about? Prosecutor Williams asked. The original cash was approximately $800,000 in 1933 currency, Emma replied. Based on historical investment patterns and the appreciation of the land it was hidden on, the current value is approximately $47 million. Vincent's composure cracked. $47 million? You're talking about giving away $47 million to people who aren't even the original victims. I'm talking about doing what my grandfather should have done 70 years ago, Jake replied. Breaking the chain of profit from crime. Making restitution for harm done. Tommy Castellano stepped forward menacingly. But Maria moved between him and Jake. Stand down. Tommy, this isn't about our family's pride anymore. Maria, Vincent warned. Remember who you're talking to. I'm talking to my nephew, she replied firmly. I'm talking to someone who's been raised to believe that taking money earned through violence and fear is some kind of birthright. Uncle Frank died trying to go straight, Vincent. He died trying to make amends. Maybe it's time we honored that instead of clinging to blood money. Sheriff Martinez had remained silent throughout the exchange, but now he spoke up. What about you, Jake? Your ranch is facing foreclosure. Your family has been through hell. You keep nothing. Jake looked at his children, saw the pride and resolve in their faces, and felt something settle into place inside him. We keep enough to save the ranch. Maybe $200,000, just enough to cover the debts and give us a fresh start. The rest goes to the fund. That's over $46 million you're giving away, Agent Richardson observed. It was never ours to begin with, Luke said simply. We've lived on it for 3 generations. It's time to give it back. Vincent's rage was palpable. You're making the biggest mistake of your life, Sullivan. My family has a long memory. So does mine, Jake replied calmly. And I choose to remember what my grandfather learned too late, that money stolen through violence corrupts everything it touches. I choose to remember that real wealth comes from being able to sleep at night. Maria stepped fully away from her brother, moving to stand beside Jake's family. I'll help with the fund. I'll help identify the victim families. And Vincent, if you or anyone else in our family threatens these people, you'll answer to me. Maria. No! Her voice cut through his protest like a blade. I've spent 40 years watching our family justify violence and theft by calling it tradition. Uncle Frank tried to change. Grandpa Joe tried to change. It's time we honored their memory by actually changing. Agent Richardson and Prosecutor Williams conferred quietly for several minutes before Richardson addressed the group. The federal government is prepared to accept Mr. Sullivan's proposal. We'll establish the fund under Treasury oversight with annual public reporting on its activities. The families identified as legitimate crime victims will be contacted and offered participation. Mr. Sullivan will retain sufficient funds to resolve his debts and maintain his property. This is insane, Vincent sputtered. You're all insane. Tommy Castellano whispered something urgent in his ear, and Vincent's expression shifted from rage to calculation. This isn't over, Sullivan. Family honor isn't something we forgive or forget. Then you'll do it without me, Maria said firmly. Tommy, Vincent, you can drive back to Chicago alone. I'm staying to help coordinate the fund. Sheriff Martinez stepped forward. Mr. Torino, I'm going to suggest you and your associate leave now, peacefully, and I'm going to suggest that if any harm comes to the Sullivan family in the future, the investigation will start with you. Vincent stared at Jake for a long moment, his face twisted with fury and disbelief. Finally, he turned toward his vehicle. You have no idea what you've given up, Sullivan. No idea what you've thrown away. Yes, I do, Jake replied quietly. I've thrown away 70 years of guilt. As the Escalade disappeared down the drive in a cloud of dust, Maria turned to Emma. Your research, how detailed is it? How many families were you able to identify? Emma smiled, the first genuine smile she had worn in weeks. Detailed enough to spend the next several years making a real difference. Want to see? Agent Richardson shook Jake's hand. Mr. Sullivan, you've made a choice that very few people in your position would make. I hope you understand the significance of what you're doing. I understand that my grandfather spent 21 years carrying guilt he couldn't escape. Jake replied. I understand that my children have shown more courage and wisdom than I managed in 45 years of living with this secret. And I understand that some things matter more than money. As the federal vehicles departed and Maria settled in with Emma to begin planning the fund's implementation, Jake found himself alone with Luke on the porch. The silence was comfortable now, no longer weighted with secrets and shame. Dad, Luke said finally, I'm proud of you. I'm proud of us. Jake put his arm around his son's shoulders, careful of the healing ribs. Your sister saved us all, you know. Her research, her moral clarity, her refusal to let us take the easy way out. She learned it from you, Luke replied. You could have kept the money, could have told us to keep quiet and just paid off the ranch. Instead, you taught us that doing right matters more than being comfortable. Inside the house, they could hear Emma and Maria discussing educational funding priorities, their voices animated with purpose and possibility. Emma's laptop was already open, financial projections and victim family trees spreading across multiple screens. Think she'll run for office someday? Luke asked, grinning. Vincent's expression hardened. Sentiment doesn't change ownership. That money belongs to our family, does it? Emma stepped forward, opening her second folder. I've spent the last month researching the documented crimes committed by Frank Torino's organization between 1925 and 1933. Extortion, illegal gambling, bootlegging operations that sold poisonous alcohol, protection rackets that bankrupted legitimate businesses. I found descendants of over 40 families who were direct victims of these crimes. She handed copies of her research to each group. The money our family has benefited from came directly from these crimes. Every dollar was taken from legitimate business owners, from families trying to make an honest living during the Depression. Some of those families never recovered. Their children grew up in poverty because of what Frank Torino's organization did to their parents. Luke spoke up, his voice gaining strength. We can't give the money back to the original victims. Most are dead. But we can give it to their descendants. We can use it to fund programs that help people rebuild from criminal victimization. We can break the cycle. Agent Richardson leaned forward. What exactly are you proposing, Mr. Sullivan? Jake folded his grandfather's letter carefully, returning it to his pocket. I'm proposing we establish a victim restitution fund. The federal government will oversee its administration to ensure transparency. Maria here has agreed to help identify legitimate victim families from the historical record. The money will go to education funds, small business loans, and support services for families affected by organized crime, both historical and contemporary. How much money are we talking about? Prosecutor Williams asked. The original cachet was approximately $800,000 in 1933 currency, Emma replied. Based on historical investment patterns and the appreciation of the land it was hidden on, the current value is approximately $47 million. Vincent's composure cracked. $47 million? You're talking about giving away $47 million to people who aren't even the original victims. I'm talking about doing what my grandfather should have done 70 years ago, Jake replied. Breaking the chain of profit from crime, making restitution for harm done. Tommy Castellano stepped forward menacingly, but Maria moved between him and Jake. "Stand down. Tommy, this isn't about our family's pride anymore." "Maria," Vincent warned, "remember who you're talking to." "I'm talking to my nephew," she replied firmly. "I'm talking to someone who's been raised to believe that taking money earned through violence and fear is some kind of birthright. Uncle Frank died trying to go straight, Vincent. He died trying to make amends. Maybe it's time we honored that instead of clinging to blood money." Sheriff Martinez had remained silent throughout the exchange, but now he spoke up. "What about you, Jake? Your ranch is facing foreclosure. Your family has been through hell. You keep nothing?" Jake looked at his children, saw the pride and resolve in their faces, and felt something settle into place inside him. "We keep enough to save the ranch. Maybe $200,000, just enough to cover the debts and give us a fresh start. The rest goes to the fund. That's over $46 million you're giving away," Agent Richardson observed. "It was never ours to begin with," Luke said simply. "We've lived on it for 3 generations. It's time to give it back." Vincent's rage was palpable. "You're making the biggest mistake of your life, Sullivan." "My family has a long memory. So does mine," Jake replied calmly. "And I choose to remember what my grandfather learned too late, that money stolen through violence corrupts everything it touches. I choose to remember that real wealth comes from being able to sleep at night." Maria stepped fully away from her brother, moving to stand beside Jake's family. "I'll help with the fund. I'll help identify the victim families. And Vincent, if you or anyone else in our family threatens these people, you'll answer to me." "Maria." "No." Her voice cut through his protest like a blade. "I've spent 40 years watching our family justify violence and theft by calling it tradition. Uncle Frank tried to change. Grandpa Joe tried to change. It's time we honored their memory by actually changing." Agent Richardson and Prosecutor Williams conferred quietly for several minutes before Richardson addressed the group. "The federal government is prepared to accept Mr. Sullivan's proposal. We'll establish the fund under Treasury oversight, with annual public reporting on its activities. The families identified as legitimate crime victims will be contacted and offered participation. Mr. Sullivan will retain sufficient funds to resolve his debts and maintain his property." "This is insane," Vincent sputtered. "You're all insane," Tommy Castellano whispered something urgent in his ear, and Vincent's expression shifted from rage to calculation. "This isn't over, Sullivan. Family honor isn't something we forgive or forget." "Then you'll do it without me," Maria said firmly. "Tommy, Vincent, you can drive back to Chicago alone. I'm staying to help coordinate the fund." Sheriff Martinez stepped forward. "Mr. Torino, I'm going to suggest you and your associate leave now peacefully, and I'm going to suggest that if any harm comes to the Sullivan family in the future, the investigation will start with you." Vincent stared at Jake for a long moment, his face twisted with fury and disbelief. Finally, he turned toward his vehicle. "You have no idea what you've given up, Sullivan. No idea what you've thrown away." "Yes, I do," Jake replied quietly. "I've thrown away 70 years of guilt." As the Escalade disappeared down the drive in a cloud of dust, Maria turned to Emma. "Your research, how detailed is it? How many families were you able to identify?" Emma smiled, the first genuine smile she had worn in weeks. "Detailed enough to spend the next several years making a real difference." "Want to see?" Agent Richardson shook Jake's hand. "Mr. Sullivan, you've made a choice that very few people in your position would make. I hope you understand the significance of what you're doing. I understand that my grandfather spent 21 years carrying guilt he couldn't escape," Jake replied. "I understand that my children have shown more courage and wisdom than I managed in 45 years of living with this secret. And I understand that some things matter more than money." As the federal vehicles departed and Maria settled in with Emma to begin planning the fund's implementation, Jake found himself alone with Luke on the porch. The silence was comfortable now, no longer weighted with secrets and shame. "Dad," Luke said finally, "I'm proud of you." "I'm proud of us." Jake put his arm around his son's shoulders, careful of the healing ribs. "Your sister saved us all, you know. Her research, her moral clarity, her refusal to let us take the easy way out. She learned it from you, Luke replied. You could have kept the money, could have told us to keep quiet and just paid off the ranch. Instead, you taught us that doing right matters more than being comfortable. Inside the house, they could hear Emma and Maria discussing educational funding priorities. Their voices animated with purpose and possibility. Emma's laptop was already open, financial projections and victim family trees spreading across multiple screens. Think she'll run for office someday? Luke asked, grinning. Up next, we have 2 more incredible stories that are waiting for you. Just click the image you want to watch, and it will take you there. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe. It would mean a lot.